Testum Vaida Taurum, Jagus Jasatuyon Karap Animi, Dagu Chipajimi.
There's no crueler place to wring a living from the land than the far north of Pakistan. This is the meeting place of the great mountain ranges of Asia and of the furthest frontiers of Russia, China, India, and Afghanistan. The terrain is brutal, the soil thin, the water scarce, the climate merciless. Clinging to the mountain sides on tiny terraced plots and scattered through the valley floors, there are nearly 1 million people. The mountain walls keep them isolated from the outside world and from each other. Always they've lived on the edge of extinction. They struggle to survive family by family. To see their children fed, they've cut down the trees, eroded the soil, overgrazed the pasture. To enrich their lives to any real degree would seem impossible. They need so much. They have no organization, no capital, apparently no hope. Until the turn of the century, every valley was a fortress, reached by secret paths and fragile bridges of rope and brushwood, made deliberately treacherous to trap the outsider. Each tiny kingdom was ruled by a strong man or mir. They were all hard men for a hard world. Some were careful of their land and people. Some were ruthless and profligate, growing rich by raiding the caravans on the trade routes beyond the passes and selling slaves in the markets of Badakhshan. The Mirs had the power to organize their people, to build terraces and irrigation channels, to carry the water of the melting glaciers to the cultivated land. For the mountains that keep out the invading armies also keep out the monsoon rain. And without irrigation, all the fine terraces of grain, pasture, and fruit trees would be barren deserts. But all the land and all the water was in the gift of the Mir. There was never enough for everyone, and most families stayed miserably poor. Through the centuries, the essentials of their way of life did not change. In the 1970s, the government of Pakistan deposed the Mirs and dissolved their kingdom, and gave the land to the tiller. But the small holdings were tiny, and without leaders to organize the labor, the water channels fell into disrepair. For the small farmers of the northern areas, life was as hard as ever. Their condition would seem almost hopeless. But in the 1970s, the Great Karakoram Highway was completed, one of the most astonishing roads ever built. A motor road running all the way from Islamabad to the Chinese border. It was built at enormous cost in time, money, and human life. And for the people struggling to survive in these isolated valleys of the north, it could indeed be the road to a better world. Shukri Begum is 85 years old. 3 times a day, she has to walk 2 kilometers to fetch water for her large family. But in the last few years, a new spirit has been moving in these mountains, a spirit that's already bringing changes in a pattern of life set firm for generations. These rugged and independent people have been learning to work together, and already they're gathering their first harvest. The spirit was released and set to work by the coming of the Aga Khan Rural Support Program in 1983. The general manager and the inspiration of the program was an able and devoted expert in rural development, Shoaib Sultan Khan. His conviction was that given the impetus and the right framework of support, these villagers could manage their own affairs, make their own way to a better life. They had to form a village organization that would be effective, lasting, and fair to even the poorest of them.
پاکستان میں جہاں پر کہ چھوٹے چھوٹے کسان ہیں وہاں پر اگر برابری اور تعاون کا نظام نہ کیا جائے تو ایک ایسا نظام ابھرتا ہے جس میں کہ کچھ لوگوں کو تو فائدہ ہوتا ہے تمام لوگوں کو فائدہ نہیں ہوتا.
The program's approach was simple and direct. The diagnostic survey is the key tool in initiating the Rural Support Program strategy. It's a series of interactive meetings between villagers and the AKRSP team. The three phases of the diagnostic survey are called dialogues. The process begins with a first dialogue. The villagers of Chaltbala have already held a second dialogue. Here, water is to be piped more than 1,000 meters, from an irrigation channel on one side of the village, all the way over to this area, known as Kurkundas, the barren land. Now the villagers are ready for a third dialogue. This explores the terms of partnership between the Rural Support Program and the new village organization.
آپ کو یاد ہوگا چیئرمین صاحب جب 12 جنوری کو ہم یہاں آئے تھے تو آپ سے جو گفتگو ہوئی تھی اس میں جو آپ کے ساتھ چھلت بالا اور چھلت کا جو علاقہ ہے اور آغا خان دیہی اشتراکی پروگرام کے ساتھ جو اشتراک کی بات تھی اس میں پہلی شرط یہ تھی کہ آپ ایسے منصوبے کی نشاندہی کریں جس سے کہ زیادہ سے زیادہ گھرانوں کو فائدہ پہنچے. آپ نے ایک جو قرقنداز کی آپ کی اسکیم ہے اس کو سیراب کرنے کی اس کی نشاندہی کی ہے اور اس کا جو سروے ہے وہ ہو گیا ہے. تو کیا آپ کو منظور ہے کہ یہ اسکیم آپ کے لیے ہے؟
The senior engineer explains the results of the second dialogue. He details the costs for materials, wages and maintenance, and these are discussed until everyone understands and agrees.
تو اے اکثر ہے ان کو کمینے صاحب تو اے جو مرک تے انما جہان یا جہان تو ایئر بس اس کے ساتھ بہت بڑا خطو کو شروع ہو پر زمین ہم تو جگہ جے کے اگر ایسی شرط ہے اگر سو میٹنگ تو دوبارہ تو ایسی کارروائی اتو کو سو مجھے بطور یہ کرنی میٹنگ جو علاوہ کچھ شاید ارا ان کی سوس ہر میٹنگ میں جا ہوگا تنظیم مجاہنت تو جیک نہ جگہ بچت تھا کیوں کھڑے تھا بچت مطلب اسکیم کے ساتھ تعلق کی سوچ تو میں کی بچت ہے ایک فنڈ سسٹم کریٹ تھا. اگر میٹنگ میں تھے جاتے بس آج کی کاروائی اصل تعلق ختم ہے کہاں سے کام لیے ہیں
آپ چھلت بالا والوں نے اپنے وہ صدر سیکریٹری اور مثالی کسان چن لیے ہیں.
صدر کون ہے آپ کا؟
لطیف صاحب.
آئیے لطیف صاحب. تو میں یہ لطیف صاحب کو کیوں چنا ہے آپ نے صدر؟